Welcome in, everybody. This is episode 3 of SEC Mafia. We're glad that you are joining us here. Hope you've been enjoying listening to us so far. Just a couple of dudes just rambling on about some football. Um, yeah, great weekend of college football. Hope everybody had a wonderful, wonderful Thanksgiving. Hope everybody ate too much food, too much turkey and dressing and mac and cheese and things like that. Great weekend between some great football teams. Texas A&M, the Iron Bowl, good old fashioned hate rivalry. Got a lot to
Egg
dive
Bowl.
into tonight. Egg Bowl, oh, absolutely, absolutely, the Egg Bowl. Can't forget that one. Got a lot to dive into tonight, and we just want to say thank you guys for joining us. Like always, we release every Tuesday to YouTube. Working on getting it to other
Late Monday. Sometimes
platforms.
like tonight it may be late Monday or Tuesday
Yeah,
morning.
yeah,
Just want to
late
let people
Monday, things like that. Yeah, so let's just dive into it. We got some contact information, guys, and please, please, we enjoy doing this. So please follow us on X, formerly known as Twitter. We have all of our handles up, so you can follow us right here. We have a Facebook as well. You can just look up SEC Mafia on YouTube. Please, on YouTube, like and subscribe. That way you can get some notifications, and you can listen to us every week that we post. We've got something new that we're actually going to try out with the email. Randy, you want to tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so we've got our SEC Godfather email up and running. You can see our email address there on the screen. If you've got something you would like for us to talk about football wise, shoot us a question via email. Comment on Facebook, comment on X, Twitter. We'll be glad to incorporate those things into the show. Um, Keep in mind this is an SEC type show. Of course, this time of the year, as we get in toward the playoff push and we do a few shows in the playoffs, we'll talk more about other conferences and teams as it kind of narrows down. But we're going to be very very SEC heavy, so try to keep your comments about SEC teams, your questions about SEC teams, but definitely hit us up and interact with us.
Yeah, absolutely. And like he was saying, we're never gonna do anything for clickbait. We're never gonna just try to start absolute nonsense. Like everything that we post and everything that we give out to you guys is just gonna be a sincere question, sincere comment, things of that nature. And please, on any of our platforms, feel free to comment under anything. We check these things daily. So anything that you comment underneath, it is seen by us. And so we want to incorporate you guys into the show. And so with that, we actually have some shout outs from this past week with our fan base's guesses on the scores of the game. So, Randy,
Yeah, so like I said, we had some of our listeners emailed us scores, posted scores on Twitter, X, posted scores on Facebook. A few of our listeners we know, and they text us their scores. But for the Texas A&M, this one came from Twitter. Burnt Orange fan had it a 7 point game, 27-20. Iron Bow, this was commented on Facebook. Dante Williams, 31-17. Georgia Tech. I guess 8 overtimes caused everyone to be way under on the actual final score, but KB Morrow had it a 7 point game. That was about the closest that we had seen. Dante Williams on the Egg Bowl. That's a second for Dante this week. And then Connor Bruner got on a hot streak. He hit Tennessee Vandy pretty close, 28-10. KB Morrow come in again with Clemson, South Carolina. She had that a 4 point Gamecocks win. They ended up winning by 3. Connor Bruner, Missouri, Arkansas nailed it. Perfect score, 28-21. Big time shout out to Connor Bruner. LSU, Oklahoma, KB Morrow was the closest on that one. Connor Bruner comes in again, 35-21, Louisville, Kentucky. And then this one was via Twitter as well. Depressed Gator came in 38-9. And it's really awesome for us. Like I say, we're a father and a son, just doing a podcast, just kind of hanging out, talking some football, and to see fans commenting on this, or listeners, not fans, but to see listeners commenting on this. Um, Texas fans, Gator fans. I know within these comments are some Alabama fans and different ones. It's pretty cool for us to see that. So again, thank you to everyone for interacting with us and predicting our scores.
absolutely, and shout out Connor again, man. That's awesome. Perfect score for Mizzou Arky.
That
Have to just
this is the third. This will be the third podcast, but this was the second week that we had done this. So it took us only our second week before someone nailed a perfect score. So So that was
That's
awesome.
I have to do something special for you, Connor. How about that? We'll try to do something special for
Absolutely.
him. And so with that, we got to get straight into it, man. There's just a lot to unpack here, a lot, as you can see. I mean, just so much fun this weekend with the Mafia matchup, a co-Mafia matchup, I should say, from last week is Texas versus Texas A&M, and so this is actually the first SEC rendition of this game, and the first time these teams have played since 2011. And if you guys remember, the last time they played at Kyle Field. Justin Tucker kicked a game-winning field goal for Texas to win 27-25. Um, a lot to unpack from this game. If you're Texas A&M, you're kind of scratching your head, wondering what has happened in the latter half of your season. Um, and if you're Texas, you're looking ahead now to the SEC championship. Congratulations to Texas to making it in their first year in the SEC, 11-1, great season, 7-1 in the conference, with their eyes set on the SEC and on towards the playoff.
Yeah, and I said this last week. I guess this is just going to be a reoccurring theme. Heck, it has been for several years now. I know, I know the game of football has changed. It's the rules have changed. It's more of an offensive game. That really started back in the day with Steve Spurrier, running up the score on people. But a lot of the rules have been incorporated to make it more higher scoring. I guess it's kind of like baseball. You go to a baseball game, most people to see home runs. So I guess you want to see scores and stuff. But one thing I do not understand, said it last week, why is 3 points so bad? Early in the game, you've got a 0-0 game. Texas A&M leads 3 points on the field, going for it on fourth down. They get stood up. In the fourth quarter, their offense had done nothing. They had one touchdown via a pick six. They get to the fourth quarter. It's a 17-7 game. They block a punt. They drive down to the 2 yard line. On third down, they get stood up. Fourth down rolls around. They've got a chip shot field goal that cuts it to a one possession game. Take the 3 points. Nope, they go for it on fourth down and they run the ball right up the middle against Texas. They get stood up, and with about 4.5, 5 minutes to go at that point in time, the game was over. It was done. Kick the field goal, cut it to a one possession game, and at least give yourself a chance. Your defense had played pretty well. Texas had scored 17 points. You needed one more stop. You would get the ball with a chance to tie and go into overtime.
And I'll lead with sort of the same thing. And a lot of the things that we talked about last week with this game was environment, and I thought Texas handled the environment very, very well. Um,
Absolutely.
but another thing, another reoccurring thing, and this has been the way for college football of all time, is momentum. If a team has momentum, that is more deadly than scheme sometimes. And so just like with the 4th and 1, later on in the fourth quarter, with 5 minutes left, there was also a 4th and 1 on their initial drive where they're driving down the field and
Yep.
you're dicing them up. Marcel Reed made some great reads, and he was passing the ball. A lot of good scheme there, and you make it down to, I want to say it was the 9 or 8 yard line, and you try to go for it on 4th and 1. You gain the lead if you kick a field goal right there, and you don't give Texas that much momentum. You sort of back them up and say, "Ooh, these guys, they drove the field on us, and they're up 3-0, and that helps your crowd out." Just like we said last week, a crowd's eyes are focused on a scoreboard, and if you somewhat
Exactly.
take the lead 3-0, that place is going nuts. Um, Texas's defense is elite,
They
and
are.
and we saw that this game. Uh, I will say Texas offense got some breaks with Arch Manning's touchdown and Jaden Blue's touchdowns. Those were magical. Those were amazing highlight plays. They were also breaks. Um, and we see now that Sark has built a program around, I'm going to say, quote unquote, weaknesses, not necessarily a weakness, but not his strength. His strength is an offensive mind. And Texas's offense wasn't mind boggling, but they were able to wear down the Texas A&M defense, which led to Trey Wisner's stat line. I mean, come on, 33 carries, 186 yards, an average of 5.6 yards a carry. That stat line, with that and you extending drives and you holding time of possession, you wear out a defense, and that's essentially how Texas won the game, was just keep away in the second half.
Yeah, and that's kind of my big thing with the last fourth down conversion that Texas A&M failed. They had 102 yards rushing for the entire game. You averaged 3 yards per carry for the entire game, and 4th and 2, you line up in a set that says, "Hey, we're going to run this right down your throat." It's a goal line package. There's three tight ends in the game, and the second I saw them line up on 4th and 1, I really thought in that situation they're going to try and bunch everybody together, and they're going to roll Marcel Reed out. He's going to do some kind of play action boot or something and get him out on the edge, try to find the tight end in the back of the end zone. No, they just tried to plow right into the teeth of that defense. And once you missed that, it was game over. Had they kicked the field goal early in the game and it's 17-7, or I'm sorry, 17-10, okay, I can see you going for it in that. But when you're down 2 scores, take the points and make it a one-score game and give yourself a chance at that point in time. Like you said, Texas's defense is elite. That's the one thing that we did not take into consideration as we picked Texas A&M last week to win this game because of the environment.
Hmm.
Defense travels. Defense travels, running game travels. If you're going on the road in a hostile environment, the best thing that you can do is make the game boring. And it was sort of a
Yes.
boring game to watch. And that's exactly what Texas did. And I really think that shows the maturation of Steve Sarkisian. 15 years ago when he was at USC, he would not have stomached winning a game like this. But since he's went through Nick Saban's rehabilitation and he's gotten in the SEC now, and he sees that defense can ride you, or you can ride a defense to a championship, he goes into this game in this hostile environment and says, you know what, I'm going to ride my defense and I'm going to force Texas A&M to make the mistakes, and I'm going to be the one to capitalize off them, and he did that.
Absolutely. Congratulations to Texas on their great first season in the SEC. And so with that, going to kind of look at the rest of the matchups from Week 14, starting with the Iron Bowl. One of the greatest rivalries in all of college football right here is just a hatred between these two teams. Um, I thought that Bama's defense was immaculate for this game. Bama's defense actually held Auburn to 98 rushing yards. And with that being said, another kudos to our defense is that Auburn failed to convert on all four. Well, I'm not going to say on all four. They failed to convert on the mass majority of our turnovers. They only had 6 points on 4 turnovers. So credit to the defense getting off the field when it mattered. Um, proud of Alabama just because this team has been up and down. They've been up and down all year. I mean, bipolar, schizophrenic, whatever you want to call it. I have yet to see any ounce of quit. And that's across the board. Coaching staff, players, they all seem to still come in and week out and put in the work. Um, Even if coaching is a little bit sketchy at sometimes. I was really, it was a good Iron Bowl. It always is. It's always sloppy. It's always these two teams going at each other's throats. So
I'm going to say this, and again, we've said this for 2 weeks now when it comes to Auburn. The offense needs to flow through Jarquez Hunter. And
yes,
this was a prime example of him just going MIA. Jarquez Hunter for the game had 13 carries, 56 yards, 4.3 yards per carry. If I've got a back in the SEC that's getting 4.3 yards per carry, he's getting 25 touches. He's
yeah,
going to get that. This blows my mind, this stat. Okay. Auburn was inside the red zone
2 for 3,
4 times. I'm sorry, yeah, 3 times.
three
You
times.
know how
Yeah,
many touches? You know how many touches in those 3 trips that Hunter got? He got one
I was
touch,
gonna say
and it
zero.
was no 0 carries. You are correct, 0 carries. It was one middle
One, t-
screen to where
yeah,
Peyton Thorne hung him out to dry and got his bell rung. How do
yeah,
you
yeah.
not? How do you not put the ball in your best player's hands in the red zone later in the game? Okay, it's 14-3. You got a chance before halftime to make a statement. quieten the crowd. And I actually got a chance to go to the football game on Saturday. It was a pretty good crowd. I thought going into the game that they would kind of be dead after the events of Oklahoma the week before. It was a pretty good crowd. You had a chance to kind of quieten the crowd down before halftime. You've got the ball, you're driving, you're inside the 5 yard line, and your best player doesn't get a touch. And you end up
Yep.
having to settle for a field goal before halftime. Fast forward, you get an Alabama turnover. Alabama really come out in the third quarter and began to dominate. They're up 28 to 14. Auburn gets a turnover. They've got a chance to score, make it a one possession game, and really make it uncomfortable. And you take your best player, flank him out in a quad formation, and you throw a pass
Hmm.
with him in which he throws an interception. Now,
Interception.
again,
Yep.
I don't want to come across like I'm an Auburn hater. Like I say, we're trying to be neutral on this podcast. But one thing that I've not liked with Hugh Freeze is he has a tendency to throw his guys under the bus, or maybe not necessarily to throw them under the bus, but put blame on them. He was asked about the interception that Hunter threw after the game, and he said, "Well, he should have read that the safety stayed home, and he never should have made that throw. He should have thrown it back to Peyton Thorne as a screen pass." How about you don't ask a running back to read an SEC defense? What's wrong with what you were doing at that point in time? Just continue to drive the football. Um, that's one thing that I think if I was an Auburn fan, I would look at this season and I would really scratch my head and just say, why against Kentucky do we ride our bell cow to a victory? Why against Texas A&M do we ride our bell cow to a victory? And then why against Vanderbilt and Alabama does the guy get 12 and 13 carries? It just doesn't make
Yep.
sense to me. But
Yep.
again, a big time rivalry. Alabama gets their ninth win in Coach DeBoer's first season. Auburn's got a great recruiting class coming in. We'll see if they can hang on to that, and that can give them some momentum going into the offseason. But I do believe that Coach Freeze's seat's going to really begin to get warm going into next season.
And so with that, I feel like a lot of people have thrown a lot of blame on Peyton Thorne, but it's like you say, it falls back on your coaching, and I blame Hugh Freeze, and here's why I blame Hugh Freeze. So back in 2021, Peyton is a redshirt sophomore at Michigan State, and he's the starting QB. Okay, and he's got 3,000 passing yards. He's averaging 250 yards passing a game. He set the Michigan State single season record for most touchdown passes with 27, surpassing Kirk Cousins. They finished 11-2 with the AP poll ranked ninth at the end of the year, going on to win the Peach Bowl over number 12 Pitt. Who was his running back?
Kenneth Walker.
Kenneth Walker the third. There you go. So if he can do this at Michigan State with a decent running back, whose stats are very, very, very similar to Jarquez Hunter, and I'm not saying like this is falling on the running back or anything like that, but Michigan State's system is similar to what Hugh Freeze has done this year in that if they would have utilized Jarquez Hunter throughout this season, they would have won two more ball games, three more ball games. We could have been looking at an eight and
Easily, easily,
four.
easily,
And
easily,
that's the point that
easily.
I'm trying to get here is it's not all on Peyton Thorne because we know what Peyton Thorne can do with his arm. He has a weapon at his arm. It's just when you put him in a system to where he's prone to fail with the choices that you give him, it's not a good mix. And so I do not blame Peyton Thorne at all. He's had a great career. Flip over to look at Bama. Milrow now has 20 20 rushing TDs on the season. This is the third most single season rushing TDs by an SEC quarterback. There are only two above him that are quarterbacks, and they are Tim Tebow and Johnny Manziel. So that's pretty good company. Milrow's stat line, I mean, 17 carries, 101 yards, 6 average yards per carry, and 3 touchdowns. I mean, this is possible when you force defenses to space out and you utilize RPOs and play action like we should have done a week ago against Oklahoma. I mean, take a look at the receiver stat lines this week. You had Jeremy Bernard, 7 receptions for a buck and 11. Ryan Williams, 3 receptions for 53 yards. CJ Dupree, 3 receptions for 46 yards. Oh my goodness, we have tight ends. Wow. I thought the coaching was so much better this week for Alabama, utilizing the space that was given off the blitz. opening up the passing game, which then can open up your running game. And Auburn defense allowed Bama to go 12 for 18 on third downs, which is 67%. Bama was just extending drives this game and holding time of possession. Bama's time of possession was 36-35, and Auburn's was only 23-25. So, I mean, this week, drastically different from last week for Alabama. Um, and like we were talking about, up and down, up and down, up and down. I understand that, but DeBoer has done a heck of a job. 9 wins in his first year. He won his Iron Bowl in his first year. He's up there with Franchione and a couple others to only have done this. So um, Alabama is now in a waiting period. They shall have their destiny decided this week by a group of guys in a room somewhere in the
Absolutely.
United States. So kudos to both of these teams for a hard fought game. Auburn looking forward to next year with their good recruiting class, and so on and so forth. So good job to both of these teams. And with that, we need to move on to Georgia versus Georgia Tech. Um, Georgia
Nobody
Tech
had
had
this
all.
on their bingo card of being the game of the week, but it turned out to be the game of
Hey,
the week.
it was the game of the week, for sure. I mean, we should have put this one. Hindsight's 2020. This would have been a co-mafia matchup. Um, this was Georgia's 31st home game win. This is tied for most in SEC history. Like we've seen all year long, um, the away team, Georgia Tech, had all the momentum in first half. I mean, credit to Georgia Tech's O line. They worked well and they were coached well against UGA's front. But like we've seen from almost for many of Georgia's games this year, they are a second half team.
Georgia Tech, to my surprise, they were the more physical team in this football game, especially
They
for the
were.
first three and a half quarters. Um, 563 total yards, averaged 6.7 yards per play, ran 84 plays. Now I know the 84 plays is a little bit inflated because of the 8 overtime periods, but again, remember, once you start that third overtime period, it's just 1 2 point conversion. After that. Uh, but I mean, threw for 303 yards, ran the ball for 260 yards. I mean, they really had their way, and looked like they had this game in the bag. And I'm going to shout out one of our listeners right here. This was a pretty comical moment. So again, we do our score predictions, and we had one listener that predicted a Georgia Tech win, and he and I have corresponded through Twitter. Um, and he sent me a message midway through the third quarter, and he says, "Take a look at my Georgia Tech prediction. It's looking pretty good right now." And I messaged him back and I said, "Dude, you've just give them the kiss of death. It's just like you've mentioned a pitcher was pitching a no hitter in about the sixth inning. And then about that time, Georgia Tech scores again to go up by 14. Then I message him back and go, hey, you know what? I think you're okay here." And then, of course, Georgia begins their comeback, and he ends up, messaging me again, and he says, "Oh my God, I don't know what I've done. This is unbelievable." But it was pretty funny the way that unfolded. Um, Once again, we saw the wonderful, fabulous SEC officiating rear its ugly head in this football game. There was a
Yep.
suspect pass interference that gave Georgia another set of downs late in the fourth quarter, and I've not looked at it a ton, but there was a questionable hit on Haynes King with a couple of minutes to go. He appeared to have the first down that would have iced the game and put the game away, and he was hit and fumbled. Um, it definitely, I'll say this, it was close enough that it should have been stopped and looked at for targeting. I don't want to be one of those that just says, oh, it was, because in this day and time, who knows what targeting is anymore. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but we ranted on it last week. I don't want to go off on a rabbit trail again, but something's got to be done with officiating. But let me say this: one thing I love about Kirby Smart, one thing I love about Kirby Smart coach football teams, they do not quit. Down
Mm-mm.
14 with 5 or 6 minutes to go in the football game, most teams would have checked out, laid down, been done. Not his team. They continued to fight. They continued to make plays. They continued to find a way, and they ended up with a very memorable 8 overtime rivalry game win.
Absolutely. And to extend on that, UGA did some great things in that second half. They shortened some drives, they saved some time, they were hitting big plays. Shout out to Carson Beck, man. He's taken some backlash for some of the plays and stuff and games that he's had this season. But 65% completion with 297 yards and 5 touchdowns. And I know the 5 touchdowns, is I get it. You go to overtime and it's a direct score, but he made some throws in the second half, man, that you only see on Sundays, fitting it between safeties and corners, fitting it between linebackers and safeties. So kudos to him. I thought that they did a great job, and like you said, not laying down. And with that, I've got a question. And anybody can comment on this underneath the video if they want to. Should the overtime rules be changed, and how would you do it? See, we had this problem way back when LSU played Texas A&M when it went to 8 overtimes. So we changed the rules now, and we still see games going to long overtime stretches. They changed the rules to try and prevent that, but we still see this. So I'm one to believe that I don't like the NFL overtime rules, but I believe that the game is won how it should be played, not throwing all of your trick plays out on a 2-yard line at the end of the ball game. I think you should win it how the game should be played, which is football. Start them on the 50, start them on the 100, whatever. But you have to have some form of actual competency of play and scheme and time management be incorporated into the overtime.
Yeah, I like the fact that in the college game both teams get a chance. Like
No,
you
I
said,
do too, and I'm not saying
I
that
don't
both
I
teams shouldn't get a chance.
and even the new NFL rules, the way they try to incorporate this to where if the first team kicks a field goal, then the second team gets a chance. But if the first team scores a touchdown, the second team doesn't get a chance unless you're in the playoffs. Then if the first team scores a touchdown, then the second team can. That's all just garbage. I like what you said. In overtime, start out at your own 40-yard line. That way, you don't already have a field goal in your pocket. Start out at your own 40 and you drive from there. If you go to a second overtime period and nobody scored or both teams have scored, then move it up to the 50. And then you can kind of keep shortening the field to kind of shorten things. But I'm like you. I don't think you should ever get to a point where you're just throwing out your best 2-point trick plays. I would
Yeah,
I would rather see a live field goal kicking contest or something, starting out with a 40-yard field goal, then backing it up to a 45 and 50 and it being live and you having a chance to block it. I would rather see that than that 2 point one play 2 point conversion garbage. That
yeah,
needs to go. Could you imagine
absolutely.
could you imagine a national championship or a playoff game or a conference championship being decided on a 2 point conversion contest like we saw with the Georgia Tech game the other night? That'd be sickening.
Yes.
That'd be sickening, man.
And it puts strain on the defense already because inside the 10 it's hard to cover man to man, and a lot of times that's what you have to do. So kudos to Georgia, man, not quitting. uh, had that dog in them the whole second half. They fought through and they
Pun
won.
intended.
uh, Pun intended, absolutely right there. Shout out to Georgia Tech, man. Brent Key, he's another one of the um, Saban guys, went through Saban camp. Um, he's got that program going in the right direction. So kudos to Georgia Tech. They're going bowling. They've got a bowl game to look forward to. With bowling in mind, let's move on to the Egg Bowl. Ole Miss 26, Mississippi State 14. This is Mississippi State's worst finish since 2003. They had the same record. I don't know about conference record, but the worst finish since 2003. Um, They had a good offensive scheme in the first
This
half.
this game started like, man, you watch the first quarter and you're like, okay, Mississippi
Mississippi
State
State's
come to
got it.
play. Yeah, they come to play. This is a rivalry game. This is, if if you ever hear the old saying when it comes to rivalry games, throw the record books out. Man, Mississippi State believed that for the first quarter.
Yeah.
They didn't look like the 0-7 SEC team that came into this game. They came out playing well. The offense was moving well, and then for both teams, really, they both just kind of got stagnant. Ultimately, it was three Mississippi State turnovers that just did them in, and then
Mm-hmm.
the Ole Miss defense just kind of clamped down. But one thing I will say that was very surprising to me, from watching this game, was how much Jackson Dart just absolutely struggled in this football game. Most teams have been able to have their way with the Mississippi State defense all year, especially through the air. And Jackson Dart goes 14 of 24, completes 58% of his passes for 143 yards. That was
Mm-hmm.
very, very surprising to me. All in all, Ole Miss had 397 yards. Uh, and I don't know if this was Mississippi State kind of playing above their head. They knew it was their last game. I don't know if it was Ole Miss kind of having a bit of a letdown after what happened at Florida last week. But this one really did not go the way that I saw it going. It was much, much closer. I did think that Mississippi State, would the first half went about like how I thought it would go, but I really thought that Ole Miss would separate in the second half, and they just really were never able to just pull away.
Mm-mm. No. And so from the defensive standpoint, rush defense in this game was very good. I mean, they held Mississippi State to 39 yards, but 291 yards through the air. Lane Kiffin was given a blank check at the beginning of this year and said, "Go buy us a defense. We are going to throw the wolves and throw you every sort of resource you can to get a hold of a defense to go win a championship." Essentially, I mean, let's be
And
honest.
and basically
And
basically that was done because and I may be wrong about what I'm saying. Okay, it's not like I know what everybody's got in their NIL collectives, but Ole Miss just doesn't strike me, and from what research I've done, they don't strike me as the team that can say, hey, we're going to throw 30-40 million dollars a year into our football team. This was
absolutely,
calculated. They looked at this schedule. They went 10-2 last year with a very similar schedule, and they said, you know what, we've got a very similar schedule. It is going to be one of the easier schedules in the SEC. We're not going to have to play
hmm
Texas. We're not going to have to play Alabama. We're not going to have to play Tennessee. We know we've got Georgia. When you looked at Ole Miss's schedule at the beginning of the season, you thought, this is a one-game schedule right here. This is a one
hmm
game. And I think they kind of looked at that and thought, you know what? This is our chance. If not now, when? And they looked at it and said, like you said, let's go buy us a defense. Let's go get us a top-notch defensive line. Let's go bring some guys in here that can be difference makers. And even if we lose this one game to Georgia, you know, we're still going to make the playoffs. And it kind of just blew up in their face.
absolutely. Ole Miss now awaiting their future for tomorrow's rankings on Tuesday night. Mississippi State, they are done, obviously, 2-10. A lot on Jeff Levy's table to try to figure out for next year. So, all in all,
Yeah, after an
you
0
got to
and 8
figure some.
SEC conference record,
You got to figure something
he
out.
he's not going to be on the hot seat after just one year because he really took
No.
over a dumpster fire with what happened. With Mike Leach's sudden passing and then Arnett, making it a season as interim and then getting run out of there. They're going to be
hmm
patient with him, but you got to start seeing some progress in year two.
Yeah, absolutely, no doubt. And as far as Lane, he won't be anywhere. He's Ole Miss's, quote unquote savior. But I do think that with what he was given, he has put out less, and so sort of back to the drawing board for next year. For them, they are going to a bowl no matter what the committee decides. So they get that extra month of practice to get some of their early recruits in. I know signing day is coming up. I think it's this week actually, early signing
The
day
early
at
signing
least.
period is this week. Yep.
So I got a lot to look forward to for next week's podcast with that, and so on and so forth. So with that, let's go into the next rivalry game between Tennessee and Vandy. Tennessee entering the game at 9-2. um, or 10-2. My bad. No, 9-2. Finishing the
Year
year
9-2
ten
and
and two.
finishing it too. Hmm.
Finished the year 9-2. Vanderbilt, congrats to Clark Lee going bowling for the first time since 2018 for the Vanderbilt Commodores. Um, I definitely you can sense the culture change. I mean, especially from the opening kick to where they had a kick return, they had some special teams going on. That they've had a complete culture change in that place to where I haven't done enough research. But if Pavier gets to come back, I know he filed a lawsuit against the NCAA. They really could do something special next year. Maybe win 7, win 8 games. But there has been a culture change, and kudos to Clark Lee for that. Um, if you're Tennessee,
Pavier did go through senior day Saturday, so I'm thinking he's probably anticipating maybe
okay,
not,
well,
and that may not mean anything. I don't know.
okay, well, good for him. Um, if you're Tennessee, do you think you should worry about the lack of progression that Nico has made with his ability to hit long balls this year downfield? He struggled yet again with the long ball this game, but his game has been RPO and play action, and he played and catered to that very well. Uh, Obviously, Dylan Sampson has been the workhorse of the offense. 25 carries, 178 yards, averaging 7 yards a carry. 7 yards a carry this game. I mean, that is insane for an SEC team. But should Tennessee be worried about Nico going forth into the playoffs with his inability to hit a big play?
So this is what I love about college football and talking football. I've actually got it in my notes that I thought this was one of Nico's better games. He was 18 of 26, completed 70% of his passes, 257 yards, averaged 10 yards an attempt, passer rating of 195.3. Um, and something that they did a good job of in this game was getting the ball out a little bit quicker and hitting receivers in stride, allowing them to get yards after catch. He completed a pass to Thornton Jr. for 86 yards that really helped them break the game open there in the second quarter when they found themselves in a big hole. For about a quarter and a half, it looked like Diego Magic was back. It looked like he had
Yes.
one more in him, but they had the kickoff return, then they had the Dylan Sampson fumble, which created a short field, and they were up 14-0 and had about 40 yards worth of offense at that point in time. And then, like we have seen so many times this year, the Tennessee defense put the clamps on, and something that Tennessee was able to do that most teams have not been able to do is they actually were able to grind the clock out, control the clock. They had 33 minutes time of possession versus Vanderbilt's 26 and a half. Whenever you go back to the Alabama game when Vanderbilt pulled the upset, they had the ball for like 40 minutes, 41 minutes to
Mm,
Alabama's 18 and some change. Tennessee said, we're gonna stop you from doing that. We're not gonna sit
yep.
here and let you get in rhythm and just grind the ball down our throat. We have a pretty good running back on our side as well. And let me just say, when we live in a world in which Dylan Sampson is not a finalist for the Doak Walker Award,
It's.
I, I don't know what world we're living in.
I mean, dude, he's the number one back in the SEC right now. I mean, he
I,
leads
I,
the
I would take
SEC in
him and
rushing
Jarquez Hunter
touchdowns.
on my team any day. I would take him and Jarquez Hunter on my team any day of the week.
Absolutely, absolutely. And with that, so like you said, Nico's he didn't have a bad game, and that's what I'm not saying that he had a bad game. It's just that his gameplay is those short RPO throws, hitting guys in stride. I don't think he had a pass completed over like 10 yards this game. Every downfield ball was just underthrown. Um, I don't foresee them having to make big plays to win games as long as you got Dylan Sampson in the backfield. Um, and Nico has progressed, over the years to be a better quarterback, but with just his lack of progression with the long ball, being able to connect on guys deep. But like you
Absolutely.
said, he had a heck of a game. 4 touchdowns, 257 yards passing. Dylan Sampson, just an absolute workhorse. Congratulations to both of these teams. Uh, Tennessee, I believe they're ranked sixth right now, ahead of Ohio State in the AP poll. They're awaiting placement. That they truly have drawn the better half of the stick, missing out on the SEC, and they're guaranteed, almost guaranteed, a spot in the playoff. More than likely, are going to
Yeah,
host too.
they're in. They're in. Any world in which Tennessee's not in the playoffs, you should not even have a playoff at this
No,
point.
absolutely,
And
absolutely,
I'm going to say this much: they've done enough. They should be hosting a first round playoff game at Neyland Stadium.
absolutely, absolutely. That place is a hard place to play at, and they deserve that first round hosting treatment for what they've done this season. So with that, going to go into a little SEC versus ACC matchup here with South Carolina Gamecocks going to Clemson Tigers. Both these teams finished 9-3 after this week. Lenoris Sellers, my, Lenoris Sellers, career high 166 rush yards with 2 touchdowns on 16 carries. I don't know if you noticed that, but that's an average of 10 yards a carry in this game. A shout out to him, man. He is a baller. I think that him redshirting last year and coming up into the program, I think he was developed just enough to be able to do this year.
Yeah, he's going to be a problem going forward. This was not a
Yes,
game when you look at the stat line. Okay, this was as evenly matched as a football game could be. South Carolina 431 yards, Clemson 419 yards. 63 plays for South Carolina, 69 for Clemson. Third down conversions 53 for South Carolina, 47 for Clemson. Red zone, both teams were 2 for 4. Both teams, neither team really had a penalty problem. There were
mm-mm.
some turnovers, 3 for South Carolina, 2 for Clemson. Time of possession, 30 minutes, 37 seconds for South Carolina, 29 minutes, 23 seconds for Clemson. I mean, every single, category you can look at, and it was pretty similar. Now, South Carolina had more of their yards rushing versus Clemson's passing, but the difference in the game is in the fourth quarter when the game was on the line, Lenora Sellers put the team on his back and wheeled his team to a victory. And when Clemson had a chance to drive down the field and match that, Cade Klubnik could not complete a pass, threw it behind the receiver, tipped up, and it was intercepted. At the end of the day, this was
Absolutely,
about Lenora Sellers taking his team to a victory, and he's one of those guys to where him and DJ Lagway are really similar in their styles. When you think about a quarterback um, putting up 164 yards, you're like, well, this guy probably didn't have the best game in the world. It's not that Lenore Sellers or DJ Lagway are going to put up these crazy stats. It's just that they're going to make 4 or 5 plays a game in which you just sit there and go, "Wow, how did that guy do that?" And he's just
absolutely.
got that will to win, and that in my opinion, that's what took them to a victory on Saturday was Lenore Sellers just taking them across the finish line.
Former 3-star, by the way, guys. Three
Yep,
star.
yep.
Didn't
Development.
even get looked at. Didn't even get looked at by Clemson. His only offer was South Carolina. So yeah, I think on the other side, you also have to give South Carolina's defense credit. They held Clemson to 14 points. That was the fewest since the Georgia game in week 1. Guys, Clemson had 7 drives of 5 plays or less. They could not sustain. They could not sustain, and their defense was forcing Clemson's offense off the field, giving Lenora Sellers more opportunities on the field. So, kudos to them. This could have been another Co-Mafia matchup of the week. I mean, this was just another hard nosed game, low scoring game. Uh, it was a good one. Good one. With that, we move along now to the Arkansas Razorbacks versus the Mizzou Tigers, the Snowmageddon game, people.
The
I
Snowmageddon
mean,
Bowl.
you looked out there and it was 3 foot of snow before you even blinked. So
Who
yeah,
says
this
SEC teams can't play in the code, baby? Who says
that's
SEC
exactly
teams
right.
can't do it?
That's exactly right.
I will say
Uh,
this much about this game. This was another evenly matched. When you look at the stats, again, Arkansas actually outgained Missouri 377, 361. Kind of a sluggish game, as you would imagine, playing in snow and sleet and ice. Uh, the two statistics that really stick out to me that did Arkansas in, They were 27% on third down conversion, so basically one out of every four they were completing. And they had two turnovers. And to Mizzou's credit, in the nasty environment, they had zero. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
Nice year for Mizzou. They finished 9-3. I think, with their schedule, with them dodging some of the big hitters, them dodging Georgia, them dodging Texas. They had those preseason aspirations based on their schedule. I do think this is probably a little bit of a letdown. There really wasn't a signature win this season for Missouri. Still, 9-3 is a nice season. Um, Arkansas had two or three games that they let slip away, like this one, like the Oklahoma State game earlier in the season. I think Sam Pittman's going to be another one of those coaches that in the offseason, you're going to be looking at, and Arkansas fans are going to be looking at this and saying, okay, we brought Bobby Petrino in to run the offense. The offense got a little bit better. We've got Green in as our quarterback. We've got a playmaker. I think they're going to want to see some improvement next year with this staff.
And I think you will. And I think Taylor Green's just a start for the transfer portal for them. They're with the ability to go out and get somebody like Taylor Green. I think more guys will be drawn by that to play for a guy with Taylor Green. So, yeah, great game. Like you said, Mizzou finishing 9-3. Um, Arkansas 6-6. Both teams looking to go to a bowl game here. Don't think Missouri's getting into the playoffs. Don't know if their strength of schedule is quite that high. But both teams, great year. Looking forward to next year watching those guys perform. Our next matchup on the slate is Oklahoma versus LSU. LSU at home just routing these guys 37-17. Nussmeier, 22 for 31 with 277 yards and 3 touchdowns. That's just who Nussmeier is, man. He's gonna throw it that many times, and he's gonna complete that many times. Receiving, I mean, there was guys all across the board getting it. You had Chris Hilton, 2 receptions for 85 yards. Kyron Lacey, 3 receptions, 41 yards and a touchdown. Hilton Jr. actually had 2 touchdowns on the night. So just multiple guys getting involved in the passing game. You had Caden Durham actually come out of his shell a little bit. He was averaging about 7.3 yards a carry, 11 carries on 80 yards. So just a great night for LSU offensively and defensively too.
Yeah, it was odd that LSU didn't try to just keep running their quarterback over and over and over and over again when it looked like
Yeah,
Oklahoma
yeah,
would be,
absolutely.
keying into that. But like you said, the thing that stuck out to me was LSU did to Oklahoma what you have to do to Oklahoma. Their front seven is their front seven's borderline elite. They've got very good defensive ends that can get after the quarterback. Um, their secondary is average, and LSU
Mm-hmm.
exposed that. They got the ball out quick. They didn't give the defensive ends a chance to just tee off on Nussmeier. Got the ball out quick, and then once they kind of slowed the defensive ends down a little bit, and were going side to side, then they start hitting some balls over the top. Just a great game plan, and this is what is so tough about the SEC. Um, it's hard to go on the road in this conference. I mean, you see Oklahoma, gear up for
Yes.
their Super Bowl a week ago, and then they go to LSU and they lose by 20 in a stadium to where, LSU was blown out a month ago by Alabama in that stadium. It's just very tough week in and week out. When you look at these SEC schedules, the average SEC team is playing 7, 8. Whenever you look at their non-conference, the way most SEC teams schedule non-conference, just like LSU scheduling USC and UCLA non-conference, Oklahoma scheduling Tulane, Alabama scheduling Wisconsin, Florida plays Florida State, which I know they're down this year. Georgia plays Georgia Tech. Most of your SEC teams play 7, 8, or 9 bowl eligible teams. It is a
Yes.
grind every single week, and that's why you see results like this. And at the end of the day, it is about the teams that can be consistent every single week.
And so, like you said, with bowl eligible teams, the SEC actually has 13 teams that are going to a bowl game.
Right.
Big Ten has 12. The Big 12 only has 9, and the ACC surprisingly has 13 teams as well going to a bowl game. So
But how many of those teams are going to a bowl that are 6-6? When you look at the SEC and you look at
that's
the
what I was about
Alabama
to get into.
9-3 and 8-4 teams, you don't have like you have in the Big Ten to where you've got four teams that have 10 wins or better, and then basically everybody else is 7-5 or 6-6. You know,
That's what I was
the
getting.
the
Yeah,
the the SEC, you truly have 6-6 teams like Oklahoma that can beat top 10 teams in Alabama. You've got the Arkansas who can beat the top 10 teams in Tennessee because you've got to bring your A game every single
every
week.
week. Yep, absolutely, absolutely. And with that, congratulations to both of those programs as well. Louisville and Kentucky. Not
Not
really
much
going
to
to get in
say.
depth.
Yeah,
Yeah, not
beat
really going to get
down.
in depth of that.
Yeah.
Um,
When
is
you
it
turn the
time for a
ball over five
change?
times, well, first off,
Yeah,
when you turn the ball over 5 times and you're outgained by 150 yards, you don't have much hope to win that football game. I do think Mark Stoops has done enough at Kentucky. He's been consistently a 7, 8, 9 win coach. This is the one bad year that he's had. I don't think it's time for a change. I would even venture to say, with what Kentucky is, I would be careful. If they go 6-6 next year, I would be careful pulling that plug on him even then. But if they feel like they can do better than that, that's on them. It is surprising though. Mark Stoops is one of the top 15 highest paid coaches in the country, making $9 million a year. So maybe you do
hmm
ask yourself that question: are we getting $9 million worth of coaching from what we're getting from the guy? I don't know. I don't know.
it's hard to tell. I think it's just a culture issue. I think that people there have bought into the facade of we're a basketball school. That's all we'll ever be. If you look at our history, that's all we've ever been. And I think it's more of a culture that is set in stone. And like you said, six
You
wins
know
for
what
them,
changes
seven
that?
wins. Say that
You
again.
know what changes? I said, you know what changes that? You said they're a basketball
What's
school. You know what changes that?
what's that?
Winning. Winning. Look at Alabama and Auburn, and this is definitely not a basketball podcast by no means. But when you look at Alabama and Auburn, up until 6, 7, 8 years ago, football school, football school, football school, and then you've seen Bruce Pearl take
Absolutely.
Auburn to a Final Four. You've seen Alabama get to a Final Four last year. You're seeing those two fan bases just getting enamored with basketball, traveling all over the country to follow those two basketball teams. Why? Because of the product put on the court. Same thing with Kentucky. Are they a basketball school? Yes. You want to change that? Start winning. I promise you, an SEC school that wins, their fan bases are going to follow.
Absolutely. And with that, we're going to go to the last matchup between Florida and Florida State. Florida with a big time win, 31 to 11. Um, Proud of Billy Napier, man. Like we said a couple weeks ago, not losing this team, not losing this locker room. They have fought to the end, and they have earned their right to a bowl game this year. Florida State, mm, um, can't
Train
say
wreck.
much. Train wreck. This game was sloppy. A lot of turnovers from both teams. In the end, Florida did capitalize with field position, shortened most of the time for them. Um, Back to the drawing board for Mike Norvell and the FSU Seminoles.
Well, familiar name that broke during the Iron Bowl. Iron Bowl. I thought that was kind of funny.
Oh,
But
Gus.
the Gus bus is revving up for
He's
another run in the SEC. As he's going to be the or the ACC, but always playing Florida, having ties to the SEC. But he's gearing up to be the offensive coordinator there at Florida State. With Florida, they just bullied their way to this win. They rushed for 235 yards and held Florida State to only 239. Forced 5 turnovers, and where this does the most good for Florida is, like you said, making a bowl game, giving um, Lagway and that young offense two
extra
extra
practices.
weeks to come together and practice to build momentum going into the next season. That is
And
huge for
see
them.
that's a lot of thing that and I mean me being
Something
around the
about
program or
recruiting
whatever,
that a
but
lot of people. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
and that's what I was going to get into is a lot of thing that just the average fan may not know is that if you make a bowl game, you can allow your early enrollees to come into the
Yes.
program early, and they can actually practice with your team, and that sort of gives them a head start. A few players that did that, I know for Alabama, was Bryce Young. Bryce Young was able to come in young like that during that stretch of bowl season and develop. And so it's just good for young guys to get in. There's no classes during that time. So you have guys coming in early like that. There's no classes. They can go into the flow of practice, learn the facilities, and then slowly incorporate school into it with the next semester. So it's just good for those young guys and even players who are already there like DJ Lagway. Just an extra 2 weeks to just grow in your skill set and get better. So kudos to them. Great matchup between those two teams. Um, Moving along now, the only Mafia matchup game of the week, baby. SEC championship game. Georgia versus Texas. Neutral site, Atlanta. Uh, we saw what these two teams did the first time they played each other. First time around, Beck was 56% completions with 3 interceptions. Trevor Etienne carried the team on his back with 3 touchdowns, 19 carries, and 87 yards. Quinn Ewers, we saw some shaky play from him during this time. Uh, 2 fumbles, 1 interception, but he did have 2 touchdowns. Trey Wisner, only 52 yards rushing. So I think we're in for a defensive battle this game. Randy, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that this is one to where I mentioned earlier about how Steve Sarkeesian has kind of figured out his team. The first matchup, a couple more stats that stuck out to me. Texas was 13% on third downs. They gave up
Mm-hmm.
7 sacks. They turned the ball over 4 times. As a team, collectively, they had 29 yards rushing. It's really when you start reading how bad the stats were for Texas, you really look at it and say, my God, how did they keep it a 15-point football game? I think that in that football game, Steve Sarkeesian figured out his team. I think he went into that football game, the offensive mind that he is, and he says, okay, it's all on your shoulders, Quinn. It's your time to go out and show the world who you are, what we are. Let's go out and torch this Georgia defense just like Alabama did. And it kind of blew up in their face. They were, like I say, sacked 7 times. He had 2 costly fumbles backed up in his own red zone that Georgia recovered, created short fields, and it really was the difference in the football game. When you look at Texas, the last 3 or 4 weeks of the season, they won a game against Arkansas where they scored 20 points. Won a game
Mm-hmm.
against Kentucky where they scored 31. That's getting on up there. And then we've seen them win a football game against Texas A&M scoring 17 points.
17.
I think Sarkeesian has realized that hey, I don't have to come out and jump on somebody and get up 14 to nothing or 21 to nothing. I don't have to go in here and throw the kitchen sink at them and jump out to this big lead. I've got a defense good enough that we can just play chess back and forth and we can have stalemates back and forth and I can force them into making a mistake and then I can capitalize on their mistake and I can win a 17-7 football game with my defense.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's figured that out. And I think going into this game, he's going to try to force Carson Beck into being the Carson Beck from the first half of the season where he had turnover troubles. And I don't think you're going to see them make those mistakes. I think you'll see them keep some of their backs in to help chip on the defensive pass rush. You'll see more tight ends involved in pass protection, and you'll see them get the ball out quick. Get the ball out to Isaiah Bond on some speed sweeps, quick screens, quick hitches, and things like that, and get that Georgia defense running side to side, and then start taking the top off in the third, fourth quarter, and then start hitting them with Wisner with some body blows. I
Yeah.
think with Texas, they had their first and second string running backs get hurt in preseason, and it's kind of taken them a while to find that dog in the backfield. I think they found that in Wisner, and I think this is going to be a different game. I'm like you. I think it is going to be more of a defensive grind. I think it's going to be hard hitting, and I think it's going to be low scoring.
So a couple of keys to this. um, Keys to this game is which quarterback shows up.
Hmm.
We know Quinn Ewers. He's averaged a couple of turnovers the last few games, especially the first go around within. Carson Beck, first half of the season, he was turnover plagued, throwing interceptions every game. He has picked back up. The next key is which defense shows up. Both teams, like you said, need to create pressure and force turnovers either through the air or by forcing Carson Beck and or slash Quint Ewers to force them to make mistakes. Texas has the number one passing defense in the SEC. They've only allowed 143 yards per game passing and only given up 4 passing touchdowns through the air this year. Georgia is the number 3 in SEC for passing offense. I think that even though Trevor Etienne is still doubtful with injured ribs, they found some success with the run with Nate Frazier. He's had some success the last couple games. I think the key to this is what team is more battle tested. UGA has played this game 3 or 4 times this year. At Bama, at Texas, against Ole Miss and Tennessee. And yes, I know they've won 2 out of the 4, but I think that they have been battle tested with these 4 games. And Texas's best win is 8-4 Texas A&M. The next in line is going to be a 7-5 Florida. So I think that Kirby Smart with his guys, just like we talked about earlier, there's no quitting these guys. I think that they are battle tested. They've been through enough together. The chemistry is back. I think that Carson Beck has made progress and stepped back into the Carson Beck that we have seen in past games and last year especially. And I think it comes down to Georgia's been in this situation before. They know how it is, and yes, Texas has played in the Big 12 championship last year and won, but Georgia has played this game already 4 times this year, and I think that they will be prepped and ready to go. It all just depends on if Carson Beck shows up, and with that, we can actually slide on into our studs of the week for
Give me
this
your
game
score and your stud.
because this is going to be the only SEC game this week. I'm going with my boy Carson Beck. I think that he's going to be a stud of the week. I think his completion percentage is going to be above 60%, and I think he's going to have 2 touchdown passes for at least 257 yards. So I think if he shows up, I think Georgia's defense is good enough to kind of slow Quinn Ewers down, like we've seen in the last game. I know it's hard to beat the same team twice in a season, but I think that Georgia, like I said, that they're the team that has been battle tested through and through. And if Carson Beck shows up, I think they prevail.
Here's what I like about this football game. Rightfully so, both of these teams are in the playoff. Okay, so there's not going to be a
Yes.
ton of pressure from that standpoint. Maybe there is a world with Georgia, right now seventh or whatever they are in the AP poll, coaches poll. Of course, the committee poll will drop tomorrow. They're up to fifth now. Maybe there's a world in which they just completely get blown out and they don't make it. I don't see that happening. So there's not going to be that pressure aspect on this. I think Sarkeesian plays this closer to the vest. He plays this more conservative. He grinds this thing out. And this is one of those things where we talked about, I think, on our first podcast a couple weeks ago when Ole Miss went into the swamp and were like a 4-point favorite.
Hmm.
What does Vegas know? Texas is a 4-point favorite in this football game. What does Vegas know to where when you look at a 30-15 double digit win in Austin a month and a half ago, earlier in the season, who in the world would pick Texas to avenge that the way they were dominated in that football game at home? Who would pick them to win in Atlanta against Georgia? I actually like Texas in this game. I like them to just let it all hang out, not have the pressure to get it done. The one play that I like is the under in this game. The over under is 57 and a half.
Oh
I've
yeah.
got it 20. I've got it 27, 24. That's a total of 51 points. 27-24 Texas. Um, My SEC stud is a guy that made plays in this very game last year against a Georgia secondary, Isaiah Bond. I look for him to get some separation, to get the ball in his hands quick, have a lot of yards after catch, and I like Texas to win this.
Oh, I didn't give you my score, did I?
You know, you just said Georgia and Beck was your stud of the week.
Um, yeah. Who's that coming down the track? It's the Mean Machine in red and black, baby. Give me the Bulldogs. I'm going 24-10. Bulldogs all the way.
Oh, so with this game, we put this out on our social media. If you can look in here and see the SEC Mafia leather patch hat here, whichever listener predicts the closest score, we will send you one of these hats. You can comment on the video here. You can comment on our Facebook. You can comment on Twitter. On Twitter, you can search SEC Mafia. It will pull up. I'm not a Facebook guy. I don't know how to go in there and create like a group page or whatnot. So it made me give a name. So I just put Randy Thomas in there. So our Facebook page right now, until I get all that straightened out, is just Randy Thomas. But you can comment there. You can email us. You can post on Twitter. Whoever gets the closest score, we'll send you a hat. If you are out of state, you can give us a mailing address. We will mail it to you. We'll cover the postage on that. You don't have to worry about any of that. So please, predict your scores and get one of these awesome hats right here and rep the show.
Absolutely. And like we talked about earlier in the show, we have wanted to start incorporating a email that you guys can ask us questions. So we actually have 4 questions. This is the inaugural mailbag questions segment of questions from you guys. And so Tanmo 2 with the first question: if Alabama misses the playoffs in year one, does it put Kalen DeBoer on the hot seat? I'm going to go and say no. He has, he's tied for the most wins with Frank Thomas in his first season. Yes, are Bama fans going to be disappointed? Probably so. Just because they are used to a Nick Saban winning 10 games or more every year. A little bit of a hot take. It's kind of Saban's fault we're in the way that we are, but save that for a different segment. But no, I don't think he's on the hot seat. What do you think, Randy?
No, so realistic Bama fans. Now, when I say realistic Bama fans, there is a small percentage of Alabama fans, probably about 10 to 15%, that no matter what, they think Alabama should go undefeated and win the national championship every single year.
Yeah.
There was a group of Alabama fans back during the Mike Shula days that every single year Alabama would go 6-6, and the next year, oh, we're going 14-0, we're going to win the national title. Those aren't the ones I'm talking about. Those are not realistic, okay? The realistic Alabama fans that I've talked to, most everybody predicted Alabama to go 10-2. The Alabama haters all had Alabama going 7-5, 8-4 preseason. The board split right in the
Yes.
middle with 9-3. I, I honestly think the Alabama haters, just looking at record wise, not at how you got there, but just looking at record wise, the Alabama haters are probably saying, you know what, he did a little bit better than I thought. Alabama fans are probably thinking he didn't do as good as I thought. He's kind of right in the middle. But I think at the end of the day, going into LSU and winning the way he did, beating Georgia the way he did, beating Auburn the way he did, going 9-3 with all the transfers that left, with the major injuries on defense, with Keon Saab getting hurt, Deontay Lawson
Yes.
getting hurt, Q Robinson getting hurt. I think that most Bama fans realize this isn't great, but it's not a disaster either. So I know I do not think this puts him on the hot seat, especially when the day he was hired, the biggest knock on him was this guy's not from the South. He can't recruit. He currently sits at the number 2 or 3 recruiting class, depending on what recruiting publisher you're looking at. He's doing a pretty good job of recruiting. So I think giving him time to get his guys in that fit his system, I think Bama fans are going to be patient with him and know he's not going to be any hot seat if they don't make the playoffs.
Absolutely. So next we have Dante Williams's question. If Clemson wins a close game over SMU, does the ACC get 2 teams in the playoffs, which would cost the SEC getting a 4th team? Randy, I'll let you lead with this one.
I think that my answer to that question does not involve Clemson nor SMU, but it involves Miami. Tomorrow night when the rankings come out, if Miami is out of the top 12, like the coaches poll and the AP poll has them, I think whoever loses the ACC championship game is going to get left out. Even if it's Clemson in a close game over SMU, SMU has zero ranked wins on the season. I mean, they have gotten where they've gotten because of a soft schedule. Should have gotten beaten the first week by Nevada. The only ranked team they played was BYU, and they lost to, and they've made it to where they've made it because of who they played. Now I know that there's a lot of SEC haters out there that's going to go, well, South Carolina, got boat raced by Ole Miss. Ole Miss got beat by Kentucky. Alabama got beat by Oklahoma. Sure, they did. But you know what South Carolina also did? Beat some top 25 teams in Missouri and Clemson. You know what else Alabama did? Beat Georgia, beat LSU,
And
beat
South
South
Carolina.
Carolina. So they've got things that kind of back that up. SMU doesn't have that. They don't have any win that you look at and go, that is a playoff caliber win. They have zero playoff caliber wins on their resume. Why should they get in the playoffs?
Exactly. Going to take a different route here. We're going to skip down to four first, just because I know Mr. Crump's question is going to be a long one for both of us. So, with Big Daddy TA's question, what is your thoughts on NIL and its impact in college sports?
Go
Firsthand,
ahead.
I have seen the effects on how it is. 2019, we did not have NIL. 2020, I think it was 2020 was the inaugural season, right, of NIL?
The inaugural
Yes.
season was the first year that Bryce Young started because I remember Saban claiming that he was a millionaire before he ever took his first snap. So that would have been 21.
So that was 2020 when it started because he was getting NIL deals from Bama in the 2020 season. So the landscape with NIL, and I'm going to even venture out and say with the transfer portal too, you guys have less loyalty to programs. You're more apt to, well, if I'm not getting the playing time that I feel like, I can just transfer. And plus, oh, they're going to give me a bag if I go over here. I mean, they're paying me this much and I'm going to play more. So that's one impact of it. There is a positive impact of it. Yes, it's good that players are getting paid, but there needs to be some sort of way to cap this. That way, you don't have guys just going every which direction, and guys are more inclined to stay and develop chemistry and develop with the program. And it goes back to what Coach Saban said on College Game Day about a month and a half ago. You have coaches now who are playing into this, and yes, they have to. I understand that. I'm not mad at the coaches, but you have something called transformational coaching versus transactional coaching. And what we're seeing nowadays is more transactional coaching. These coaches are catering to these players. They are buying these players. They're giving these players what they want. And that's not the way that football should be. Football should, yes, it can cater to some players, but football should be more about transformation of a young man and bettering them for later on in life. And that's what Coach Saban was talking about when he said transactional versus transformational. These coaches should be buying into these guys. These coaches should be doing things that not only better them on the field, but better them as a person, better them as a man in society to go on and be great. Either in the league or whatever they do in life. And I think part of that has been negatively impacted with NIL and transfer portal.
So I'm going to answer this question by asking you a question, and it's going to be hypothetical, and I want you to put yourself in this position. Let's do a little role play, okay?
Okay.
You are going into your senior season next year. You're finishing your junior season right now, and you're going into your senior season at Michigan.
Okay.
You were on a team last year that won a national title. You were on a
Yep.
team the year before that came up short in the playoffs. And now this season, you're on a team that took a step back, but you just went 7-5. You just had a big win over your arch rival, and your entire locker room has just been turned upside down because a high school quarterback has just been promised $12 million to come play quarterback for you. $3 million a year. You are going into your senior season. You contributed to a national title. You have been a 3-year letter winner for the University of Michigan. You've bled for Michigan. You've sweat for Michigan. You've poured your heart into Michigan. And now all of a sudden, a guy who has not played one snap of college football is going to be worth $12 million. What does that do for
Yep.
your locker room? What does that do for the
Hurts, man.
chemistry on the team? And maybe, maybe Sharon Moore can tie all that together and do all that. I just think that's one of those issues to where you have to be careful paying these high school players. It's one thing to go pay a Cam Ward or a Jackson Dart or Quinshawn Judkins or Caleb Downs. It's one thing to pay a guy that's in the portal that you have seen play at the highest level and you know can get the job done. It's one thing to do that when you've got that hole in your team and you're bringing a Walter Nolan in to play defensive line like Ole Miss did, but you're paying a guy who's 17, fixing to be 18 years old, that kind of money who's never played one snap of college football. I don't know.
Yep.
You tell
Absolutely.
me.
And so, with the last question of the night, this comes from our listener, Mr. Chandler Crump. He asked, "What scenario do you find in which Alabama is in the playoffs? And if they make it, how far can they go? Discipline seems to be a continued flaw."
You may go.
I think they're in, but yeah, you go ahead.
The scenario with Alabama, I think, is done. Um, I'm like you. I do think that they are in. I think you'll know tomorrow night again with what they do with Miami. Um, if
Yep.
if Alabama is lower than the 11 seed tomorrow night, they're done because they don't
Yeah.
play, and I don't think that there's going to be this huge drop off on conference championship weekend to where the losers are going to get overly punished. The only team ahead of Alabama or South Carolina or Ole Miss that I could see falling behind them would be SMU. That's the only one. Again, just because of their strength of record, their strength of schedule, not really having any playoff quality wins. I could see a scenario in which Clemson just absolutely pistol whips SMU. They get dropped out. Um, but I think if Alabama tomorrow night is ranked in that 11th spot or better, um,
I think it's set.
I think they're in. I think they're in. Um, the second portion, how far can they go if they do get in? I think that's where you have to flip the coin. Do you get the Alabama? Do you get the Jalen Milroe that showed up against Georgia? Do you get the Alabama and Jalen Milroe that showed up against LSU, that showed up against Wisconsin, that showed up against Auburn, minus the turnovers there, that showed up against Missouri? Do you get that Alabama team? One thing I will say about Alabama that has continued to get better week in, week out, even with the Oklahoma game, is their defense. Now, I've had so many Alabama fans say, well, they give up so many yards rushing against Oklahoma. And that quarterback, Jackson Arnold ran for so many yards. Listen, yards don't get you points. Okay, there's no stat in football that says for every 100 yards you gain, we're going to put 10 points up on the scoreboard for you. Last time I checked, you got to cross the ball over the goal line or kick it through the uprights to get points. Okay, so I'm not worried
That's
about the
exactly right.
yards. All in all, Oklahoma scored 10 points on Alabama's defense. There was a pick six and another pick that set them up inside the red zone. Their defense has gotten better week in and week out. I think if they kind of take the approach that Texas is starting to take, to where they realize we don't have to take the top off on the very first play of the game and get ourselves behind the 8 ball. We can kind of lean on our defense a little bit and then feel this thing out. Is there a scenario to where Alabama wins it all? I don't think that they're consistent enough to go win 4 playoff games. I will say this: based on what I've seen against Georgia and based on what I've seen in certain moments, I don't think that there's anybody in the playoff that Alabama couldn't beat in a one game scenario. My thing is, I
That's
don't know if they could be consistent enough to go win 4 games in a row.
so. I'm the same way. It depends on the rankings tomorrow, and with that, I want to go ahead and announce we're going to do a special episode tomorrow night. Only going to be about 20 minutes long on these new rankings that it'll release probably early Wednesday morning, if not late Tuesday night after these rankings. We're going to do a quick episode on the ranking show tomorrow. But the and you answered it how I was going to answer it anyway. Yes, I think they're in if the rankings tomorrow have us at 11 and even 12. I think we're in. Um,
The only thing about being 12 is if they're 12
yes,
and
I know
Arizona
the
State is
C.
behind them, then but if
I
they're 12 and SMU drops out and the Big 12 team comes in,
I
then there you go.
I know, and I want to answer this in a different way, and I kind of want to see your thoughts. But we'll hurry up and close out with this. All right, well, we still got our final thought segment of the three teams: Ole Miss, South Carolina, and Alabama. I do feel like we are the best of those three. And I'm not even going to use the word most deserving. That's not what this is about. From the dawn of time when this thing was set up, it's not about most deserving, it's the 12 best. And I think of those three, Alabama has shown they're the best. They've played Georgia, they've beat Georgia, they played South Carolina. Hey, we've got a head to head, and all of a sudden that doesn't matter. Um, I think that, like you said, with the defense getting as good as it has week in and week out ever since that Tennessee game, they've shown improvement. Yes, our offense is wishy washy, but if we take the approach like Texas and we lean in on our defense, I'm not saying we're going to win the whole thing. I'm not saying they're even going to get in and go that far. But if you get an Alabama team who plays like they did against the first half of Georgia, there is not a team in the world that could stop them. And so it just depends on the rankings tomorrow. If we're in, great. If they're not, so be it. Let's go, kick some rear end in a bowl game, and that's that. So, Randy, you got some interesting final thoughts on this week's episode.
Well, let me say this real quick about what you just said, and this is kind of funny to me. It's like the argument for this final, if the SEC gets 4 teams in, it's like the argument comes down to Alabama, South Carolina, Alabama, South Carolina. Ole Miss is kind of getting screwed in all this. Ole
Ole
Miss
Miss has
has a
got the
head to
head to
head.
head over South
They
Carolina.
they they have a head to head win over South Carolina, and something that Alabama and Ole Miss they both have a playoff quality win with a win over Georgia. Yes,
Georgia.
South Carolina's been hot. Yes, they've won 6 in a row. They don't have a playoff quality win.
It's
Clemson
like
is
what they
currently
did.
ranked 18th. Missouri is currently ranked 27th. Now, if Clemson wins the ACC, then okay, yeah, sure, you can say that now they have a playoff quality win. But they don't have a win like Alabama and Georgia, Alabama and Ole Miss has over Georgia, and both Alabama and Ole Miss have the head-to-head with South Carolina. But this is a lot like the Heisman Trophy and a lot of these other awards. It's like the media just gets infatuated with one team and they just say, screw all the facts, screw everything else. This is who we like, and we're pushing for South Carolina. When in truth be known, out of the three, South Carolina is probably, and I hate to use the word, but the less deserving of the three. When you look at their resume,
It's like what they did in the first 6 weeks just doesn't matter. Going
right?
3-3. And we know that this is a 12-week season. It starts in September and it goes till now, till championship week. And every week matters.
Yep,
So that's all we're going to say on that. We'll talk more on that tomorrow night on our episode. And
absolutely.
so with that, we're going to lead into our final thoughts for the night.
My final thoughts for this week's episode. Um, some of the older heads, if you're 40, that's about how old I am. You'll remember this little pop band from back in the day, New Kids on the Block. You got the right stuff. That's my final thought. New Kids on the Block. SEC newcomer Texas, ACC newcomer SMU, Big Ten newcomer Oregon, Big 12 newcomer Arizona State. The new kids on the block in the four major conferences. The new team, the new kid in the block. have all made conference championship games. That's kind of ironic to me that we're seeing that happen.
Yeah, especially with Arizona State, they were what predicted to be last in the Big 12 this
Dead
year,
last in the Big 12. Yep.
and I think SMU was predicted like either last or second to last or something like
Now
that coming
I
in
do
as
know
newbies.
a lot of people did have Southern Methodist SMU as a dark horse to win the ACC, but I don't think they were actually predicted to win it.
Okay, okay, all righty. I love that. Yeah, newcomers, congratulations. Mine is geared towards the Heisman. A lot of talk going on, a lot of conversations around this, and I'm calling it hype or Heisman. And I'm going to ask a question. Should the Heisman be given to a person who is mediocre in two positions?
That's a
Or
stretch. He's more than mediocre. He's above
yeah,
average.
that is a stretch. He is elite. I'm going to say he's
Yeah.
elite, but
I didn't
will
mean to
he
hijack
be
your final
a
thoughts, but
no, 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 no. But should it be given to a two-way player or the player who is the best player in a specific position? Um, and with that, we know that I'm talking about Travis Hunter and Ashton Genty and Cam Ward. Those are the three that come to mind. But we know that Travis Hunter, do you think he's going to be a finalist for the Benderick Award?
I don't.
Or the Blitnikoff Award? Not the Benderick. Blitnikoff Award for wide receiver? I mean, is he going to be a finalist for that? So it's just food for thought as we press onward and look forward to Championship Sunday. We thank you to all our listeners. Please like and subscribe on YouTube. We're going to pop up the social media page again. This is our social media information. Guys, we thank you so much for tuning in and listening. Got a lot of good stuff coming up. Gonna have a new episode tomorrow night, probably coming out late tomorrow night, early Wednesday on the playoff rankings. Definitely gonna have one the next Monday after Selection Sunday, going into probably gonna look more outside of the SEC then. Talk more as a whole about college football and going forth with this 12-team playoff and the outlook for each of those teams. But yeah, fun times on this episode, guys. Thank you, Randy. Thank you to all our listeners.
Thank you all.
Go
Remember,
SEC.
Comment. Get one of these glorious hats up at state.
Hey,
Have a good night.
absolutely. You never know. We may start making mugs or T-shirts or something next. I mean, we're just gonna start branding this thing, man.
We're here for the people. Whatever the people decide they want, we're gonna do, man.
Absolutely. God bless and have a good night.